Hey guys, and 1 week ago I set a mighty challenge to my Discord and subscribers that they needed to play a game of the Crimson Killers and get the most damage value possible, and the winner would be cast here on the channel. It looks like Captain Morgan is coming in the lead, and of course he does have the Crimson Killers in the centre of his force. He's come up against the force of the Empire, which is a pretty tough one, certainly not a army I thought the Crimson Killers would really fare particularly well in. We'll have to see how much damage value he can get and if he can indeed win this battle. There's going to be an extra challenge for next week at the end of the video. But first and foremost, let's have a little look at the Greenskin force. So in the front line, we've gone very cheap and cheerful, just the lads, the basic Orc boys, good for tearing apart state troops and as well as making up the numbers. In the secondary line, we do have some Orc Biggins. It looks like just the one unit here, unless there's some more on the other side. Looks like there is indeed some more and some in the back. Orc Biggins, a very underrated unit, pretty good damage dealers, and I believe they do actually come in with a rather nice little bonus versus large here. Nothing too crazy, but it certainly helps out when you're trying to take down enemy cavalry, knights, demigryphs, Karl Franz, and so on and so on. And the main centerpieces of this build are going to be Der Biggen, the regiment of renowned rogue idol. I saw this guy an absolute ton when the game first came out, because people before he was pretty fun, and he certainly is very fun. Throws gigantic rocks and is quite cumbersome though, and will become weaker obviously the more he fights. He's a bit of a centerpiece here. We also have the Hammer of Gork, regiment around Goblin Rocklobber. Leading the troops, we do have an Orc Shaman coming with the Foot of Gork, Here We Go, and Brainbuster. And leading the mighty army in the front, the most powerful goblin to ever live, Skarsnik himself, with his big old buddy Gobbler. He's going to be coming in with Fermented Fungi, of course, can rampage, lower melee defense, very powerful, as well as Spite of the Bad Moon and Get Back Here. But the main reason we're here is for the Crimson Killers. Now, these guys are actually the best foot infantry. I suppose you can only have infantry on foot, but still the best infantry in the entire game. I believe the guy's name is Zerovich. I want to say I've probably butchered his name, Zekrovich, something along those lines, who is a really fantastic YouTuber, actually does some really good unit analysis and so forth, and did prove these guys can actually go toe-to-toe with any unit in the game, at least in the infantry front, but we'll have to see how much damage they can get. In the back lines, we do have Tuners of Nasty Skulkers as well in deep reserve. Now, for his opponent's build, we do have a mixture of Spearmen, Halberdiers, Sigma Sons, and Great Swords, and Flagellants. It looks like the Tattered Souls, renowned, dotted through the front lines. A real nice mix of troops there. Quite bad to the bones, actually. That's going to be able to break through that front line of Orc boys relatively comfortably. And just behind them, we have Triple Huntsmen. They're going to be having an absolute whale of a time up against the Bigham. Over on this flank, we do have some Demigryph Knights with Halberds, as well as the Royal Outdoff Gryphites, one of the most beautiful and stunningly gorgeous units actually in the game. The Gryphites look very cool, bounding towards their enemy. They of course cause terror, always good up against the Greenskins, and I quite like this build. It's pretty good fun. We have a Jade Wizard with Earthblood and Regrowth, and up in the skies on a Pegasus, we actually have Karl Franz. So not bringing Hunt of Deathclaw. He looks just so weird on a normal size horse. I'm so used to seeing him on a mighty beastie. He's coming in with Gar Miraz, stand your ground, but nothing else. It looks like the Biggin is already having some fun throwing some rocks onto the Tattered Souls. So once again, guys, this isn't going to be, Captain Morgan isn't necessarily trying to win the battle. Of course, he does want to win, but his entire goal is centered around trying to get as much damage value as possible from the Crimson Killers. Now, I really like the pick of the Biggin here, mainly because it's going to absorb all the missile pressure. Normally, when your opponent sees the Crimson Killers, they focus fire them down, hit them with magic immediately straight out of the gate. But when you see such a gigantic, scary foe, such as the Biggin, your eye gets drawn to it and you want to focus him down. So he's going to be a lovely big distraction. And at the same time, he's doing some nice damage. He's also switched up his shots of where he's throwing them, which is nice to see. So your opponent can't juke left and right. He is now going after the Huntsman, which is a little bit of a mistake because these guys, of course, do have a spread out formation. Wants to be hitting those Great Swords and other frontline troops. All the Royal Outdoff Gryphites trying to kill some models because, of course, models can't be healed unless you're those pesky undead. We don't like to speak about them. It looks like the Orc Shaman is going to be moving up, perhaps ready to cast a fancy spell, and for now the Crimson Killers are being used in a deep reserve, obviously trying to stay away from the range pressure where possible. Lovely rock onto the Great Swords, and in the back line we do have a big Foot of Gork. Oh, that's some big damage, half health on both of those Huntsmen. It looks like they may indeed waver and break, which would be absolutely huge, as they now have got their sights really kind of reined in now on the Big and doing some massive damage as he launches a rock point blank range into the Sigma Sons. A lovely flank overload is coming down on the left hand side. Demigryph Knights and Royal Outdoff Gryphites hammer home into the Orc boys. Well, it looks like the Biggins are now starting to countercharge and making their move. But good micro here by the Empire forces. Going to be pulling out with the cavalry so they don't get hooked up on any units they really don't want to face. Crimson Killers are finally making their move. They are charging into glorious hand-to-hand. Double axes wielded. flashing straight into the Sigma Suns. This is a unit that they're going to be able to tear apart very easily without taking too much damage back. At the same time, Sigma Suns, relatively cheap. They're going to have to go on some bigger targets later in the game if they want to make up that big fat value. Huntsmen are still being focused down by the big gun here, who's really desperately trying to get them off the field. Up to 88 kills is pretty impressive. And in come the Demigryphs, everything pouring into the Crimson Killers. And this is going to be absolutely crucial for them. Looks like Stand Your Ground has been popped. The Crimson Killers, though, having a whale of a time, hacking their way through Demigryphs, who now, without the charge, are really going to soften it. Looks like there was some Orc Boys saturated in front of the Crimson Killers, meaning that they were going to take the initial damage from the Night Charge, and now they can fight quite happily. There is also some Orc Biggins, as well as the Biggin here in close proximity to support, as the Crimson Killers are now slightly getting a little bit isolated. In the back lines, the Hammer and Gork has been able to fight consistently throughout the entire battle. We haven't focused on it too much, and it looks like the Nasty Skulkers are finally making their way over as well. They've just been kind of vibing in the back there, waiting to say which way the video does go, and we've had a big, fat, just kind of blob in the middle at the moment. And the Crimson Killers up to 76 kills, doing a really good job up against pretty elite troops. If you can surround casters, and someone got within 100 damage value as well of actually matching Captain Morgan's here by surrounding characters like Vlad and casters. But it looks like these guys are going just headlong in, really trying to chew their way through the enemy infantry. The Big Gun unfortunately has Rampage at this point, and he's unfortunately he has a little problem, the same as the Dread Soaring, where despite the fact they have these huge models, they can get stuck on like little orcs and really suffer trying to push through onto the enemy formation. It looks like he does go down. A very sad sight there indeed. Empire using their cavalry quite well, now whipping up around this flank to come charging down into the rear of the Orc Biggins and Crimson Killers. A lovely Brainbuster going to be coming down in response, doing a nice little bit of damage to them, and hopefully allowing the Crimson Killers to turn and engage, as those guys are now completely surrounded here amongst the madness, just trying to hack and defend the body of the Biggin. Perhaps they hope a Shaman can resurrect it in the future. Huntsmen are now going to be able to switch their targets onto them, which is a little bit of a worry. So it looks like some Orc Biggins are starting to push out the rear, or to get to the rear of the Empire forces, and both the Nasty Skulkers are nearing now. Although the Huntsmen have managed to use up a ton of ammunition, probably get a decent amount of value on both those units. Of course, we will check at the end of the battle. Mighty Skarsnik is completely untouched at the moment, just feasting upon the souls of the Sigma Suns, and even the Orc Shaman is engaging in hand-to-hand combat. He's a really big fat cleaver, and it's always good fun to see these guys in action. More Orc Boys are returned to the field, having seen the heroics of the Crimson Killers, who are getting very low health-wise now, though, down to just 27 models. They are once again fighting Roll Adolf Griffites, Karl Franz, Jade Wizard, nice juicy targets for them to really rack up. If they can survive, their leadership is a little bit on the low side now, but the Mighty Skarsnik is nearby to shout words of encouragement, or more likely in his kind of rhetoric, probably death threats and so forth if you don't stand and hold the line. And it looks like another Brainbuster is going to be coming down once again on the Roll Adolf Griffites, as the Orc Shaman is surrounded. In the back lines, it is now just reaving through them are these pesky little nasty skulkers with their prison shanks, doing a good job just shattering off the Huntsmen, force them away from the main threat. And it looks like the Orc Biggins as well are going to clear up some spearmen if they can indeed catch them. The second unit of skulkers could be used really nicely in the central part of the battlefield now, because if they're able to hop on top of the Demigryph Knights, they can pop their little smoke bombs, and these guys won't be able to escape. And if he's not careful and he's still trying to run away rather than fight, he may take big damage. A lovely cast of an Earthblood, though, does go down on the Griffites, as well as Karl Franz. A Fermented Fungi does attempt to go down the Jade Wizard, but you have to get them below, I think it's 25% health, it's either 20 or 25, before they indeed rampage. And if you do it once, then they have to drop another 20, 25 before you can rampage them again. Roll Adolf Griffites as well, Demigryphs simply going to kite back at the moment, try to regroup their forces a little bit and take a bit of a breather. But there's a huge, just a fist of greenskins wobbling around the battlefield, and in the center is the Crimson Killers, up to 122 kills so far. How much value have they accumulated? Huntsmen going to be raining fire in on the Orc Biggins. They don't care too much, though. They're simply going to be turning their backs on them. Nasty Skulkers are starting to push in, looking to surround the Spearmen with the help of this second unit as well. In come the Roll Adolf Griffites. They are trotting forward, getting ready for a big fat charge. Unfortunately, it is pretty damp there. They just kind of grind into the Orc Biggins and trot away, or swagger away almost. These two guys really suffering to get out of here. Completely surrounded by greenskins who are desperately trying to drag these brave knights down off their mounts. And now in comes the big charge of the knights, as well as Karl Franz leading the fight. Actually, no, Karl Franz up in the skies, cowering like a little manlin. But now he is just commit as he realises the songs which will be sung about his demise if he doesn't hold the line with his troops. In come the Killers, in come the Orc Boys, completely surrounded. And I think at this point, Balance Power is still dead even. There's a lot of elite troops on the Empire Forces side, but unfortunately, he doesn't have much cycle charging potential. He doesn't have any other units he can kind of saturate in to consistently pull these guys out and back into battle. And the Nasty Skulkers, of course, do have their smoke bombs as well. So I think it's pretty much game over. Orc Biggins with Spite of the Bad Moon going to get a lovely surround, getting an even more bonus versus large. And these Elite Knights, unfortunately, are going to go down fighting as they always do, but still nonetheless go down. So Underground going to be boosting up their melee defense and leadership, keeping the fight a little while longer. The Royal Altdorf ones as well, of course, do come in with Terror, which can be really useful if the big Terror out goes down. But a lot of these guys have pretty stacked leadership at the moment and aren't too worried. Orc Shaman going to get in there for a bit of a wizard duel up against the Jade Wizard. In the distance, we do have some Orc Boys who can return. We've got the Hammer of Gork crew, Orc Boys, more Orc Boys who can all dart back. For the Empire, unfortunately, is just some Huntsmen and some Halberdiers who are making for home as quickly as possible to act like they were never here in the first place. The Jade Wizard does pop one more Earthblood, trying to heal up himself as well as Karl Franz, but it is looking very rough now as more Orc Boys do start to engage. And it looks like we actually have a pretty funny tactic right now by Capt Morgan here. Considering this is obviously for the challenge of who can get the most damage value on the Crimson Killers, he's pulling out all his other units and trying to allow the Crimsons to get some of the last damage done on these guys. But they do actually break. They're down to just 11 troops at this point. Still done a very good shift for them so far, but they are in fact going to be running for the hills. It looks like the Jade Wizard has been completely surrounded by fermented fungi, so we are going to fast forward. It's a little bit inevitable which is going to happen. He might wait one more time for the Crimson Killers to come back and try and pull back, but the characters are simply going to go down here. The Jade Wizard is fleeing for their life, which I certainly do not blame them. Looks like he's going to try to pull back and allow the Crimson Killers to try and come in here and maybe get one or two more licks in. But the Empire player still fighting strong, going after the weaker kind of opponents of his opponent's build, hunting down the crews of artillery pieces and so forth. But the Crimson Killers will eventually get a nice little surround on Franz, get one or two bit more kind of ticks of damage before he breaks and runs and cowers back to Altdorf. Very well played to these two guys. It's actually a really cool game between Captain Morgan as well as Elite on two pretty interesting builds, particularly the Empire build. That was some wild stuff coming in with the Tattered Souls units. I don't get to see particularly terribly often all round. And we will now be breaking down the damage value and so forth. But just before that, if you guys enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a big old fat thumbs up and subscribe for more Total War Warhammer content. We drop new content every single day. There's also links down below to my Discord where you can submit replays and get involved as well in the challenges, which we'll speak about at the end of the video, next week's challenge, as well as links to my Patreon and other ways you can support the channel. Anyway, enough of the fluffing around. We all know what you're here for. How much damage value did the Crimson Killers get? Oh yes, 3,761. Well, that is pretty disgusting stuff. Normally you'll see characters, lords and so forth on big gigantic mounts like Karl Franz getting this type of value, but no, it came from a mighty unit. There was someone else who managed to get 3,600 and something damage value, I believe, but Cat Morgan is this week's winner. 15k damage dealt, 127 kills, being saturated on top of their own troops, and dealing with the demigryphs really helped them out quite a lot, pretty considerably. The Biggin as well was a pretty fun pick, 1.8k damage value, certainly not shabby. He is incredibly disgusting and expensive himself, however, 10k damage dealt, but his main role here was to be a simple distraction, where the opponent would waste all their ammunition into him instead of those Crimson Killers, allowing them to really do the grunts work there of chewing their way through the Empire build. Hammer Gork did pretty decent as well, was allowed to fire for the majority of the battle, and I'm a big fan of Orc Biggins. Across the board, 700 damage value here, 1.6k, 1k, very impressive stuff from them. Nazi Skulkers were a little bit late to the party. Captain Morgan needed to bring them in slightly quicker. I actually more prefer kind of Wolf Riders or Spider Riders in this role, where you're trying to hunt down the back line. But these guys, of course, do have the bonus of having Stalk, so they take a little while longer to get there, but the opponent doesn't prepare for them and try and defend against them. Orc Boys, unfortunately, had a pretty good time. This one somehow 0 kills, but still 2.4k damage dealt and nearly 600 value, but not as insane as the bigger Arda lads in the force. Orc Shaman did a nice job as well, over a k damage value, 6k damage dealt, impressive stuff. I like his use of Brainbusters. The Foot of Gork was always pretty fun, and Skarsnik didn't really have to get his product too wet, only 600 damage value, 2.6k damage dealt. As for the forces of Leighton 7775, Karl Franz up on his Pegasus is a pretty fun pick. I almost always see him on Deathclaw. So, you know, it was pretty cool stuff. 7k damage dealt, 1.1k damage value, and up to 1991 kills. Jade Wizard, of course, did the standard good healing, and Halberdiers really did suffer. Perhaps he was expecting more of a troll-centric build, which is currently the kind of in thing with the kids with the greenskins at the moment. Signal Suns did, okay, they died, basically, but that's what they're there to do. They held the line for a considerable amount of time with the Great Swords. The Huntsman really did shine, get some good value, 1.2k here, nearly a k here, and 1.3 on this unit, but that was, of course, because they rained all their arrows down onto Biggin, and the Demigryphs didn't do too amazing, 800 damage value on the first one, 700 on the second one, so it was quite a resounding victory for the forces of the Greenskins in the end, but very well played to Captain Morgan, and getting that big damage there onto Crimson Killers. Now, not all of the challenges will be down to damage value. Sometimes it's going to be, get a win with this ridiculous build that I'll give you, or with a ridiculous character. Sometimes it'll be the most amount of kills you can get, the most damage dealt. But this week, we are going to be keeping it simple and sticking it to the damage value, at least for the next week. And it's going to be who can get the most damage value with the Amaxon Barbs. They're the Regiment of Renowned Lizardmen Razor Hunting Pack. I absolutely trashed them in my Lizardmen tier list that went up, I believe, today or yesterday. And a few people were like, no, the Maxim Barbs are amazing. You're completely wrong, so I'm here to be proven wrong. Give me some good old fat replays of the Maxim Barbs making some insane damage value. Should be pretty interesting to see. And you guys can, of course, submit them via my Discord link down below. You pop them into the replays for casting section, and please title the video or the replay Maxim Barbs and then the damage value they got. So I don't have to shuffle through all of them. I can just see, who got the most value. But anyway, guys, until next time, peace, peace. And as always, stay awesome.